Yeah, okay. So you're very welcome. We'll go to apologies, and we're one from Councillor Kieran Toman and also from Councillor Ian Wilson. Are we aware of any other apologies? Okay. If any are made known, just let me know and I'll get it put on the minute. Okay, we'll move to declarations of interest, item 2, and we'll just take them in the usual manner as we proceed through the meeting. Agenda item 3 is a report from the head of planning. Damien's going to bring these items. So 3.1 and 3.2. First one's for decision, second for information. So Damien, if you can go with 3.1, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Members, last month, the Department for Infrastructure issued a consultation paper to seek views on a proposal to amend current planning legislation to provide for the introduction of validation checklists to prevent poor quality or incomplete applications from entering the planning system. Members will recall that officers have already piloted with some success the use of validation checklists on major applications within this council area. The DFI consultation forms part of DFI's Planning Improvement Programme, which aims to create a more efficient and more effective planning system. And this programme is being implemented following reports published earlier this year by the Northern Ireland Audit Office and the Public Accounts Committee. Those reports highlighted, amongst other things, the need to improve the quality of applications entering the system. Currently, many applications are submitted without the information necessary to assess them, and this results in requests for further information, which delays processing times and impacts performance. DFI considered the introduction of validation checklists would also require a validation dispute mechanism. Otherwise, the only option available to applicants would be judicial review. So, subject to members' agreement, officers have drafted a response which is attached at Appendix 2 of the report, agreeing to the introduction of a validation checklist and that a standalone dispute mechanism should be available to applicants. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, members, have you any questions for Damien on those points? I think it's a fairly useful item in terms of that, because I know if you know the plan system, people can submit things that aren't complete, and it can leave officers on a bit of a wild goose chase trying to tie up loose ends in terms of information on that. So I think it would be a useful endeavour on our part just to try and streamline that and make it more efficient ultimately. Alderman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Damien. No, it's just to come back, yes, and the points raised here. I'm still a wee bit concerned about the willingness or the agents and how far they're on with this here in order that the applications coming forward. Are they well versed at this? And I know you in there a mechanism to allow for appeals and things like that, but where are we with the agents here? Because they're crucial to this, whether they're bringing forward all the information at that time. And even up till now, we're seeing a lot of stuff coming in lately and things may change at different times. So where does this all sit with the agents? Are they not crucial? Yeah, they are. Damien, I'm just asking for this particular reason. Thank you.
Good,
yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, well, look, I mentioned earlier that we have piloted a very similar arrangement already within this council area, and it was very much welcomed by the agents that we dealt with, because basically they see it as a way of giving them a steer to provide whatever information is necessary to get it through the system quickly. So certainly our experience has been a positive one. I know it has been trialled previously in Belfast City Council as well, and it's been received well there, as I understand it. Now, this consultation exercise is a public one, and therefore agents would be given the opportunity to feed back with any concerns or queries that they might have about it. But I think it's to be welcomed because, you know, rather than an applicant or an agent putting an application in, maybe sitting for 4, 5, 6 weeks and then getting a response back, by the way, you need X, Y, and Z, they're getting told at the very outset that this is what you need to go and provide. So it's preload, it's front loading it, if you like. And as I say, the experience we've had to date The feedback we've had to date from the pilot that we carried out has been a good one. But yeah, it's a public consultation exercise and agents can feedback themselves. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, happy enough? Yeah, thank you. No problem. Okay, well, it is an item for decision, so I have a proposer and seconder that we. Councillor Savage.
So thank you, Chair. And based on Damien's response there to Alderman Anderson's question, I'm happy to propose accept the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, seconded by Alderman Anderson. Thank you. See any other lights on or hands up? Okay, the other item is for information, and that's an update as usual in our monthly meeting on the plan and caseloads. Damien, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, yeah, just to report that the number of planning decisions that issued during the month of November, it was actually a slightly shorter reporting month because of the planning portal, the new planning portal coming in. The number of decisions that was issued was just short of 150. It was 148. The number of applications that came in was 99. So the live case number at the moment is 870. Which is down almost 50 from last month. So it's a good news story, members. You know, the live application numbers, we're driving them down. They're going in the right direction. We still have some progress to make. We want to get them down even further, but we have certainly made significant progress since the start of the business year. There have been 2 call-ins over the month of November, which brings the total number of call-ins year to date to 18. Just a little bit of information around the processing of major applications. We've processed 8 of those year to date, which has brought in 105 million worth of investment. And we currently have about 25 majors in the system at the moment. But year to date as well, members have over 1,000 decisions so far this year, and around 875 applications in. So happy, Chair, to take any questions or queries around any of that.
Okay, I suppose one of the obvious queries is in terms of the portal, Damien, how are we getting on with that whole transition, and are we seeing any problems, or is it all, I know technology can be temperamental, but we're hoping it's going to make a difference and speed things up eventually. Is that your take on it?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the medium and longer term, we will certainly see improvements. I mean, the online submissions will, without any shadow of a doubt, it will help to improve processing times. Look, with any IT system, I think anyone would tell you it's never going to be perfect on day one. And that certainly was the case. I mean, there has been some issues. There have been some issues around data transferring across, maybe not going into the correct folders, system not showing up where their consultations have issued, for example, as well. And it's maybe sort of slower than we would have expected at the moment. But look, we did expect some teething problems with it, and we are having those, but we're working our way through them. But when this system beds in, we'll see all sorts of benefits with it because, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to make online submissions helps us to process much more quickly. And that combined, I think, with this validation checklist that we covered in the previous item, I think they'll pay dividends. We'll start to see significant improvements within the planning system. Thanks, Chair.
Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, don't see any hands up, so we'll move on then to item 4, 4.1 and 4.2. And 4.3 and 4.4. So they're sort of split. The first 2 are for decision, second for information. So Tom, we'll go with 4.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Item 4.1 is a request for a name of housing development of 4 dwellings off the Kernan Road in Portadown. And details are contained within Appendix 1. The applicant's preferred name for development is Kernan Mews, and the rationale for the preferred name is that development lies within the townland of Kernan. So the officer have assessed and deemed proposals compliant, and recommendation therefore is for members' approval of Kernan Mews. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Yeah, Alderman Twyble.
Just happy to approve of the name and so propose.
Okay, Councillor McGill.
Well, happy to second as I got there.
Did we delay on that one for some reason? No, that's fine. Okay, I don't see any other lights on or hands up. So next time, moving on to 4.2 then.
Thank you, Chair. This is a request for the naming of a housing development consisting of 84 dwellings off the Inn Road in Donningstown. The maps are in Appendix 2. The applicant's preferred name for the development is Inn Road Manor. And obviously the main reason is the continuation of the current Inn Road. Members will also note from the map in Appendix 2 that this site surrounds the new Talkland Hall site that the Council approved back in June of this year. Recommendation, therefore, is for members' approval of Inn Road Manor. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, members, have any views or proposals on 4.2? I'm happy enough to propose. Councillor McGill.
Happy to second.
Scrum. All right, and then moving on to items for information. 4.3, Tom.
Thank you again, Chair. Yes, this report is to keep members up to date of the workload of the department over the first 8 months of this financial year. So during the last 8 months, we have received 2,416 building regulation applications. That comes with a notional construction investment value in the area of just under 310 million, which is actually about 60 million more than we get normally in a complete financial year. We have carried out over 10,300 site inspections and undertaken 1,612 plan assessment decisions and issued all the statutory appropriate notices on these. The department also continues to deliver the Council's property certificate function for the conveyancing of properties across the borough. In the first 8 months, we've received and administered 2,542 new applications, and we've issued 2,634 certificates to solicitors and agents relating to property sales. Thank you, Chair. This report is from members' information, but happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay. Members, any questions? None. Don't see any lights on, so we'll move on to 4.4, which is another item for information. Tom.
Thank you again, Chair. Members will note from the report that in September past that the Council received an application for a dual language street signage in respect of a specified street in the borough. Just to recap for members, the Council's adopted policy comprises the following 2 stages. Stage 1 is where an application for dual language street sign is submitted to Council. It must be accompanied by a signed petition representing not less than 1/3 of the occupiers of the street or of the premises on that street for which the application is made. The names of the names on the signed petition submitted should be verified or had to be verified by Council officers using the electoral register. Following verification, a Stage 1 report will be presented to this committee, and the Stage 1 report shall inform members about the application and whether or not the application is valid under the policy. And that report shall be for noting only, and no decision will be required. If the names of the petition accord with the electoral register and the required threshold under the policy has been met, members will be advised that the valid application has been received and the application can proceed to Stage 2. At Stage 2, following the presentation of Stage 1 to this committee, and being informed that the valid application has been received, the Council will then canvass by post all occupiers' premises on the street and shall seek the views of on the application. And following the canvassing of occupiers, officers shall present a Stage 2 report to this committee. The Stage 2 report shall outline the results of the canvassing exercise and if the required threshold has been met, i.e. at least 2/3 of the occupiers of the premises on the relevant street are in agreement with the erection of dual language signage, the report shall include a recommendation to members. And at that stage, members will be required to make a decision based on the information on the Stage 2 report as to whether or not the application should be approved or refused. This application is currently at Stage 1 in the application process. And as previously mentioned, the application was received by Council in September 2022 and was accompanied by a signed petition. As per the policy, the petition required verification against the electoral registers. Verification has been undertaken, and I can confirm that the requisite 1/3 threshold under the policy has been met. and therefore the application is valid and can now progress to stage 2 of the process, which is that the council will undertake a survey of the occupiers of residence of this street. Members, this report is for noting, but I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom, for your update on that. I don't see any lights on, so we'll move then. Let's thank Tom. We have to now go into confidential. So if I could seek a proposer under agenda item 5 to move into confidential items. Alderman Anderson. Councillor McGill, thank you. So I have to read the following statement. Members and online viewers, in accordance with Schedule 6 of the Local Government Act, exempt information, we will now be moving into a confidential session of the council. This means that we'll be turning off the public feed of the meeting. This will be returned when the meeting is restarted. Can I ask the ICT officers to please turn off the live feed and confirm with me when the confidential section of this meeting can proceed? Good. Thank you. Okay, members, moving on then to agenda item 7, which is correspondence from the Department of Infrastructure, DFI, on the Regional Planning Directorate in relation to avian flu. I think Damien's going to take this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, DFI has written to all councils to advise that DERA, Department for Agriculture, has declared an avian influenza prevention zone across Northern Ireland in respect of all poultry and captive birds from 28th of November of this year. And from that date, birds will be required to be kept indoors except in specific situations. The purpose of the letter from DFI is to remind planning authorities that permitted development rights, i.e. no need for planning permission, exist, which permit the erection of buildings necessary for housing poultry to protect them at this time. You will see there are conditions around this in terms of, for example, notifying the council before commencing development and regarding removal once the need for it has ended. But happy to take any questions or queries around any of that. Sure, thank you.
Okay, members, any questions or queries on this particular one? Want to know what it means for turkeys, really? Is that it? No queries or questions that I can note. Okay, members. Very good. Very good. Okay. Any other relevant business? I haven't been aware of any. There's been none come in the intervening period between our pre-meetings. So we're going to stop the live feed and there'll be a short recess until we start our planning applications at the live feed started? Thank you. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 6. So under the protocol, I have to read the following statement. Members of the public are advised that the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee is being held in the Council Chamber in Craigavon Civic Centre. However, due to COVID restrictions, the number of persons who can physically be facilitated in the chamber is severely limited. As a result, members of the public are only able to view the meeting on YouTube, and anyone wishing to address the committee has been invited in the first instance as an attendee via Zoom. Audio recording is being used to assist in preparing the formal minutes. Therefore, anyone participating in the meeting consents to it being recorded and being live streamed on YouTube. Also, during the course of this meeting, questions may be asked by councillors who are members of the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee, of planning officers, applicants for planning permission, objectors, or those speaking on their behalf. In doing so, councillors endeavour to ascertain the information which they feel is necessary to enable them to determine the application. However, members of the public should note that councillors will not reach a conclusion as to whether an application should be approved, refused, or deferred until the debate on the application has concluded. Okay, members, we move to appendix item number 1, which is application LIO 2021-007F. And Roshan's going to bring this plan and report, but as chair, I'm going to vacate my chair at this point because I wasn't present for the first hearing or the second hearing of the application due to being on holidays, and I would rather be in a position when commenting on an application to be more informed. So on that basis, I won't take part in this, and I'll hand over to our Vice Chair, Councillor Savage, to assume the role of Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, members, is there any other members wish to declare an interest at this stage? Alderman Anderson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I wasn't at the original, I think it was back in August when this was quite a debate on this. So that being the case, I'll be leaving the meeting and not taking any part in this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Anderson. There's no one else in the chamber nor on Zoom, online. No, nobody online. Okay, members. 4 addendum reports have been circulated. There's also been a consultation response has also been circulated. Members will be aware that there have been a number of reports in this application. Given the complexity of the issues and the unusual and exceptional circumstances on this occasion, we deem it appropriate for the applicant to make a further submission on this application. So Mr. Brian Martin is going to make a representation as a planning consultant in support of the application, and he'll have 3 minutes. I'll just make members aware that also in attendance and has speaking rights is Herbie McAleer, the agent, and also in attendance is Mr. Jim Hewitt for the applicant. A written representation in support of the application has also been received from Mr. Brian Martin, planning consultant, and that has been circulated. Okay, members, so I'm now going to invite Mr. Brian Martin to make a representation on the. Oh, sorry, folks, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Roisin, I'm going to bring you in first for your planning report.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a dwelling, proposed relocation of entrance to dwelling and reduction in curtilage on lands 65 metres northwest of 104 Clovan Eden Road, Loughgall. The proposed dwelling is sited in the same position as a dwelling previously approved under application O-2003-1487-F. Members will recall this item was presented to the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee meeting in August 2022 with a recommendation to refuse. At that meeting, the application was deferred to allow further discussions to take place between officers and the agent in relation to case law. At that time, officers recommended that the application be refused, as officers consider the previously granted planning permission has expired and there is no fallback position. The proposal therefore fails to comply with the policies set out in the SPPS and PPS 21. The 5th reason for refusal, which related to the impact of the proposed development on the adjacent list building, has now been dropped as per the updated report. The Council engaged Counsel to consider the application and in particular the representations and case law referred to by Mr Martin on behalf of the applicant. The advice of Counsel has been circulated to members in a legally privileged confidential annex. This addendum report addresses the position of the applicant and case law relevant to the application. Members will note a further submission was received from Mr Martin on Monday, and an updated report in relation to that submission has been circulated to members. The main issue for consideration is whether or not the works that have taken place have lawfully implemented the planning permission granted in February 2006. Officers have carefully considered the representations and the case law submitted and have received legal advice on the issues involved. For the reasons set out in detail in the report, officers are satisfied that Condition 7 is a pre-commencement condition that goes to the heart of the permission and that there has been a breach. It is not accepted that there has been substantial compliance, and the requirement for surveillance is an important material consideration. The Whitley principle is engaged, and officers are of the opinion that it is unlawful for the applicant to build out the remainder of the development. As previously advised, officers considered that the proposal fails to comply with the SPPS and PPS 21, specifically in relation to policy CTY1, in that there are no overriding reasons why this development is essential in this rural location. There is no change to the officer recommendation the planning permission be refused. And I'm happy to take you through the slides. And the red arrow just shows you the location of the site there. It's on the Cloven Eden Road, just northwest of Loughgall. And this is our site location plan, the red line outlining the application site. And again, this is an aerial view of the site with the red line of the application superimposed. And this is a photograph of the site, just taken with a view from the road. And another view taken just from the junction of the access to the church and the road. And a view of the site from the south, taken from the south. And another view from the Cosner Road across to the site. The red arrow denotes where the dwelling would be. And this is a view taken inside the site. And this is a view showing the foundations that have and the blockwork that has taken place on the ground. And again, you can see where the lighter coloured grass is the area which appears to have been scraped, and there is a foundation on the northern end of the square. And then that's just the spoil that has been scraped back on the site. And this is a site plan that was submitted with the application. You can see the access there and the location of the dwelling. And the site layout plan, again, submitted with the application. You can see where the dwelling or the proposed access would be relocated from the previously approved access. And these are the elevations of the proposed dwelling, which are the same as previously approved back in 2006. And again, the footprint of the dwelling, the floor plan of the dwelling. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Roisin, for that. Members, just to make you aware that Stuart Beattie, KSC, is also online, should you have any questions of him. I'm now going to invite Mr. Brian Martin to make a representation as a planning agent in support of the application. Mr. Martin, you will have 3 minutes once you start speaking. And I need to inform you that once those 3 minutes are up, I will be cutting off your microphone. So you have 3 minutes exactly. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Martin. Oh, apologies. Just get to the right one, sorry.
Thank you. Chairman, best way I can start is just to say, if an artist was asked to draw a cartoon depicting the state of this application, it would probably be a wooden wagon with refusal painted on its side. It would be sitting on a rocky road with its canvas cover in shreds. It would have just one wheel buckled and wobbling on a bent axle. And at the other 3 corners would be Miss Craney, Miss Hamill, and Mr. Mulligan, on bent knees, desperately struggling to hold it up. Their legal representative would be standing alongside, beckoning members of this committee forward and advising them to climb on board what they would say is a sturdy vehicle. Now, that may be the same legal advice that considers that it was okay to force an applicant to make significant changes to what was a perfectly valid planning application on pain of having it returned to him if he refused. That may be the same legal advice that considers it okay to do that on little more than an unwritten whim that is contrary to planning legislation. That may be the same legal advice that considers it okay for the planners to insist on including a change of house type in the application when there is no change of house type involved. That may be the same legal advice that considers it okay to now deny that there is an application before the committee for an amended access. That may be the same legal advice that now says the only proposal before the committee is for the erection of a dwelling. That may be the same legal advice which says that the Council's December 21 amended protocol, which denies an applicant speaking rights at a second committee meeting, is perfectly legal, even though it is clearly contrary to the laws of natural justice and to Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is transposed into UK legislation under Section 6 of the 1998 Human Rights Act. That may also be the same legal advice that members have now been given with a report and to which the applicant has been denied access. Advice which seeks to hide from scrutiny under the guise of it being confidential and privileged. These are not the actions of a fair and open process or of a competent authority. They are unjustifiable, irrational, and unlawful. Enforcement is discussed on page 5 of the third addendum, but there is no explanation as to what rational enforcement action the planners consider could be taken in the circumstances of this case, or if the work was recommenced on the approved dwelling. No rational action can be taken, and in that situation, as now confirmed by case law, which is actually referred to in the first few paragraphs on page 3 of the third addendum, the planning permission granted in 2006 must now be considered to have been fully lawfully implemented. Finally, paragraph 4 on page 7 of the main report to the committee is a clear signpost for the committee.
Sorry, Mr. Martin, your time's up. You've had your 3 minutes. Should any member wish to ask questions of Mr. Martin in relation to what he's going to say, that maybe he can do so. Okay, so members, we're now open for questions. Okay, maybe I'll start the ball rolling and I'll maybe ask Mr. Martin in relation to the condition 7, why he thinks that it should be ignored in this case, or set aside, maybe would be a better word. So bring in Mr. Martin, is that okay?
I'm not saying it should be ignored. What I'm saying, Chairman, is that the work which has been completed on the ground is immune from enforcement action. I think that's what is said in the report to the committee. The issue is, has the carrying out of that work rendered continuing it illegal? And the case law clearly says that if you cannot take rational enforcement action, then the work completed and the works to be continued are lawful implementation of the original planning permission. So the question really is, what rational enforcement action do the planners feel could be taken? And I don't see that anywhere explained.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. And on foot of that, I suppose I have a question for Roisin in regards to that. If I'm taking what Mr. Martin said is correct, that he believes that continuing this work would mean immunity from enforcement. Could you give your perspective on that, Roisin, please?
Thank you, Chair. The works that have been carried out to date were carried out in breach of Condition 7. So Condition 7, which is a pre-commencement condition that went to the heart of the permission, was not complied with when those works were carried out. However, the works that have been carried out to date have been there more than 5 years. They are now lawful through the passage of time. So we cannot take any action against those works that are there. However, the permission has now expired. There is no planning permission there. Therefore, to reenact that permission or to recommence, there's no permission there, so it would be unauthorised development. So on that basis, because that development would be unauthorised, we feel we would be able to take action.
Thank you very much, Roisin. Mr. Martin, just another question for yourself in relation to the case law. Could you specify which case law that you're referring to? What particular cases?
Well, the case law that I can refer to, Chairman, which is relevant to what Ms. Hamill has just said, is on page 3 of the third addendum. There's a quotation there which I made at the original council meeting in August. And what it says is where enforcement action is no longer possible, either because the time limit for taking enforcement has expired or because it would be irrational and therefore unlawful to take enforcement action, the planning permission is to be viewed as having been lawfully implemented, despite the fact that the operations may have been commenced in breach of a condition that is a negative condition. So the point is, how would it be rational to take enforcement action? And what action would that be? And that question still hasn't been answered. And a few lines down, the council's report also endorses that view where it refers to Justice Ousley in the Hamilton case, and that confirms exactly what I've just said. So the question which needs to be asked of the planners is, what rational enforcement action could be taken? That's the point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Look, members, I'm going to make a proposal that seek some legal advice in relation to this case law. I've made a proposal. Is anybody willing to second that? Thank you. Alderman Twyble. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'm going to move all those members of the Public and Regulatory Services Committee via Zoom to a Zoom waiting room. Those using the dial-in service will be placed on hold, and anyone in attendance in the chamber will be asked to leave the room to enable the committee to obtain legal advice from its legal advisor. Any member of the committee who has spoken as a supporter or objector to the application under consideration will also be asked to leave the room. The advice provided will relate only to legal matters, and no discussion of the merits of the planning application now before us will take place until the public element of the meeting resumes and you have been moved back into the meeting or taken off hold. Any legal advice provided is confidential, and any members of the committee who remain are obliged to reserve that confidentiality. An official will readmit all those required now to leave the room, and those on Zoom will be readmitted to the meeting once the provision of legal advice has concluded. Thank you. I could get the live feed off as well, Matthew. Please, Matthew. Okay, members, we have the applicant back in the room. And so is there relative legal? So is there any questions for either parties at this stage? There's no further questions, members. So will we move into the discussion phase? Okay, we've moved into discussion phase, member. Could I have your thoughts on this? Does anybody, any thoughts they wish to share in the committee at this stage? Okay, maybe members, I'll make a start on it and maybe others will follow. We had a fairly lengthy discussion about this case back in August, and it was adjourned for further discussions between the applicant and the department. There has been further reports from both sides. We've now had legal advice in relation to this. You've heard it, you've heard the reports. You've had the advice in relation to this pre-commencement on the condition number 7. So, you know, I think that the reports that we have given us a clear direction of the way forward in terms of the officers making the recommendation. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. Does anybody any thoughts they wish to share? Oh, Councillor Lavery, I'll bring you in now. All right.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose again I was listening to the contributions there of officers and the applicants and so on. And to be honest, I would be leaning to the same view as yourself, and that the recommendation outlined by officers to refuse is potentially the correct outcome in this case, sort of for the issues you outlined there. So I would be inclined to accept the recommendation to refuse in this case, but again, open to others' views on it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Councillor McGill, you had your light on. Are you all right? Okay, no problem. Okay, members, we have no further hands up or anybody at home looking to speak. And I think we'll bring this matter to the conclusion. We're now in the decision phase. So, members, we're in your hands. Mr. Martin, you have to be asked a question if you wish to speak, unfortunately. Well, you have to be asked a question, and I've moved into decision phase. We had our discussion, nobody wished to ask you a question. So, members, we're now in the decision phase. And I need a recommendation from somebody present. Councillor McGowan, I'll bring you in now.
I propose to accept the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. We have a proposal for the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Alderman Twybull, I'll bring you in now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have to say I've struggled with this proposal the whole way through. It's been a long situation. We've been listening to advice and argument and so on, but the clear legal advice is in one direction. And so whilst I would have had a lot of sympathy with the church and wanting to have the building and all the rest of it, I think we have to go along with the legal advice, and I would second the proposal.
I'm going to bring Damien in at this stage. Damien, you looking in?
Sure, just before we move off the matter and the decision formally taken, I just would like, if I can, Chair, put in record my disappointment at Mr. Morton's unflattering comments and remarks about officers who are simply here to offer professional advice to members. And it just so happens that their advice and their opinion conflicts with his own position, but it's very disappointing to hear those remarks. So just wanted to make that.
Thanks very much, members. We have had this application. There's been a proposal made by Councillor McGowan that's been seconded by Alderman Twybull. Is there any other proposals from the floor? No, there's not. So the recommendation as outlined in the report has been accepted. Thank you, members. Can we get the chair back in, Roisin, or Patricia, please?
Okay, members, you're welcome back. I'm welcome back, as the saying goes. I suppose another on the theme of welcomes. Welcome to Councillor Moutry. I think it's your first planning meeting, isn't it? So you're very welcome along. I hope you're maybe starting on a not too lengthy a meeting, which maybe isn't a bad thing. Easy in gently, but no, you're very, very welcome. And then we'll move on to Appendix 2. Which is application LA 08 2022 025 or 0275F. And Kyle Elder is the planning officer which will present on this one. So Kyle, when you're ready, you can walk away. Thank you.
This planning application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 2 new warehousing storage units and associated car and lorry parking, along with associated ancillary site works. The application is before you this evening as it is a major planning application. Officers have taken it, members have read the report and addendum in full, and as such, this is a synopsis only. The application site is on lands northwest of Craigavon Crescent, adjacent to north of the Boulevard shopping complex in Banbridge. The application site is mainly undeveloped land, but the western section of the site contains offices and warehousing belonging to the applicant EOS Estates Limited. The site is bordered by Banfield Road to the west and northwest, and housing is located to the north and northeast of the site. The site is accessed directly from Craigavon Crescent, which also serves the boulevard. The application site is located inside the settlement development limits of Banbridge, as defined by the Banbridge Newry and Mourne Area Plan 2015. The site is located within 19.3 hectares of land at Craigavon Road, zoned for economic development in the area plan under zoning BE 33. Members are advised that officers consider that the development complies with the zoning of the land and meets the key site requirement for this zoned land. The development is considered to comply with the relevant requirements of the area plan. The SPPS recognises that growing sustainable economy and investing in the future is a key strategic priority of the Northern Ireland Executive. Long-term economic growth will be achieved by improving competitiveness and building a larger and more export-driven private sector. Officers are of the opinion that this proposal fully complies with the SPPS in this regard by retaining, enhancing, and importantly delivering a modernised and competitive business to assist its competitiveness in the world marketplace in the IT solutions sector. As such, officers attach weight to this aspect of the proposed development. The proposal is for 2 buildings which would fall under Class B4, storage and distribution of the Plan and Use Classes Order Northern Ireland 2015. Policy PED 1 of PPS4 operates a presumption in favour of development, such that a development proposal incorporating Class B4 storage and distribution will be permitted in an area specifically allocated for such purposes in a development plan. Officers, therefore, are of the opinion that the proposed Class B4 use is acceptable in principle in that Policy PED 1 is satisfied. The buildings measure approximately 17.8 metres to 18 metres from ground level to their respective ridges. The site is approximately 6.3 metres lower than other units at the Boulevard complex, which extend to 12 metres high. As such, the buildings will appear sympathetic to the surrounding buildings in the Boulevard area immediately south of the site. The proposed buildings will have areas of 4,947 square metres and 1,969 square metres respectively. The layout and orientation of the buildings have been designed to make best use of the site in terms of accessibility and functionality and to limit visual impact from public viewpoints. The proposed height and massing of the buildings are necessary for the proposed operation of the warehousing storage, as the buildings need to be large enough to accommodate the storage equipment and the loading and unloading of trailers, as well as accommodate forklifts and ancillary equipment. The application proposes a landscaping buffer consisting of 235 semi-mature trees, consisting of a mixture of alder, birch, and silver birch at a height of 4 metres to the rear and side of the site. Officers are therefore of the opinion that the proposed buildings and associated yard areas will not have an unacceptable visual impact and will satisfactorily and visually integrate into the immediate area. Officers have no concerns over the design and layout in relation to the SPPS Living Places or Policy Days 2 of a planning strategy for rural Northern Ireland. In relation to noise and amenity, the site is located southwest of Banview House Care Home and Banview Court. Unit 1 is 55 metres from the boundary and Unit 2 is 60 metres from the boundary at the closest locations. It is noted that HGV movements, including the proposed turning areas, are located closer to local residential receptors. Members are reminded that the proposed development would not generate significant levels of traffic as detailed on page 13 of the report. In addition, members are also advised that the site has an extant planning permission, Q-2006-1067-F, which at this location allows for the erection of a light industrial unit and 3 business units within 10 metres of the boundary with residential receptors. Members are advised that the extant permission has been implemented and represents a valid fallback position and therefore is material consideration. A noise assessment was provided which considered vehicle noise, and the Environmental Health Department carried out verification assessments. The background noise levels were carried out between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and they were calculated to be 50 decibels. And from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., the background noise level would be between 40 and 42 decibels at the nearby dwellings and care home. The comparison of results of the impacts assessment indicates that predicted future noise levels associated with the development are anticipated to be below the existing background for all receptor locations. Therefore, in accordance with the applicable British standard, this is considered to be an indication that noise impact attributable to the proposed development will be low. Officers are satisfied that given the layout, construction type, and separation distances involved in the construction and operations phase of the development, combined with the planning conditions imposed, it is considered it will not give rise to any unacceptable adverse impact to the amenity of residential properties. As such, the proposal is considered to comply with Annex A of the SPPS and Policy PED 1 of PPS 4 and creates no conflict with the relevant criteria of Policy PED 9 of PPS 4. A transport assessment form has been submitted in support of this application. The proposal seeks to provide access via the internal roadway within the Boulevard Business Park. The access to the development is considered to comply with Policy AMP2 of PPS 3. The existing wider site has an established use as a retail park. The traffic likely to be generated by the proposed development will have a negligible impact on the surrounding road network. Adequate parking provision has been made for cars and HCVs within the confines of the site. Officers in consultation with DFI Roads are therefore content that the proposed development accords with the SPPS and policies AMP2 and AMP7 of PPS 3, criterion G, H and I of policy PED 9 of PPS 4 and parking standards. A drainage assessment has been submitted. Drainage assessment states preliminary calculations have been carried out within the drainage assessment, indicating that approximately 758 cubic meters of attenuation will be required under a Q100 event. It is proposed to provide the attenuation via hydrocells and hydro brake system. Schedule 6 application has been submitted to DFI Rivers Local Office requesting permission to discharge stormwater to a water course located southeast of the site at an attenuated rate of 25.73 litres per second. This has been based upon DFI's Rivers Greenfield figure of 10 litres per second per hectare. Finalised drainage assessment has been conditioned, but members will note that the drainage assessment provided has demonstrated that drainage can suitably be handled. Overall, in a flooding and drainage context, officers consider there to be no conflict with SPPS, the policy provisions of PPS 15 revised, and criteria D and F of policy PED 9 of PPS 4. The impact of the development and features of natural and built heritage have been considered. Officers in consultation with the competent authorities have not identified any concerns regarding the impact on natural or built heritage. Members are advised that 5 letters of objection have been received regarding the plan application. The grounds for objection have been considered in the assessment, and where considered necessary, conditions have been recommended to address the objection reason. Overall, officers consider the proposal to comply with the local development plan, the policy requirements of the SPPS, and all other relevant planning policies. And on that basis, approval is recommended for the reasons outlined in the report and subject to conditions suggested in the report and the addendum. There should just be a wee presentation then. Okay, so in terms of the site then, in terms of the site location, as I say, it was in the settlement limit of Banbridge and it's just south of the main town. Next slide then just shows the site there to the north, which is the main area of the site to be developed. Next slide then shows an aerial view of the site. We can see the Boulevard complex and then our site in relation to that to the north. The next slide is just a closer up view where you can see the existing Eagle Overseas building on the site. And that's just the site location plan. On the site layout plan there, the 2 buildings in blue are the 2 buildings under consideration tonight. The next slide then shows the floor plans of Unit 1, followed by the elevations. And then the next slide then will show the proposed plans for the Unit 2. Site sections have been included, so the top section there is looking across the frontage of the site, and then the lower section then just shows the relationship with the care home. So this is just a photograph then looking across the frontage of the site, and at the end of the road you can see the glass relating to the office element of the EOS building. So the next slide then shows the entrance to the site. This is then the office section of the building, and you can see then there's a pedestrian link between the site and the Banbridge Road. The next slide then again just shows a wider view across the site frontage. And the next slide will show then the existing EOS building on the site and an area of car parking. Next slide then looks across the site, and you can see there the Banbridge care home. The next slide then, sorry, there's a mistake there. It should say it looks across the site to Banbridge care home, but also Banbridge Court, not Banbridge Meadows as specified. But within the plans, a planting buffer would then be planted along the boundary with those residential developments. Next slide then just shows some of the retail units within the boulevard, where our site is to the right-hand side of the dashed line, and those buildings then would provide an element of backdrop. So again, this is just a photograph looking across the site, and you can just see the rear of the warehousing that's existing on the site there to the right of the photograph. So this is a view of the existing warehouse and existing boundary from the Banbridge Road, which again would have a planting buffer planted along that boundary. And just another view then from the Banbridge Road across the wider site. So this is just this just shows the site layout approved under the extant plan approval. So to the top of the site there, to the left-hand side, you can see 3 units, which were business units for use as a call centre, all within 10 metres off the site boundary with the care home. And then across to the right of that, again, there's a light business unit within 10 metres off the boundary. So next slide then just shows the plans for that business unit are referred to, and the final slide then just shows the plans for the call centre units proposed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. Members, we have Martin Kelly from Gravis Planning, and he's present via Zoom, and he's going to make a representation in support of the application as the agent. So, Martin, you're very welcome. And there should be a time clock up on your screen there, so that'll start ticking as soon as you start speaking and addressing the meeting. And then once you're 3 minutes up, I'll have to bring you to a close just on that. But when you're ready, you are free then to commence your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I am Martin Kelly, planning consultant with Gravis Planning, who is the agent for this planning application. I'm joined by Mr. Trevor Higgins on behalf of the applicant and Mr. Richard Parks, architect from McAdam Stewart Architects, who are here to assist with any queries that committee members may have regarding the proposed development. The planning application seeks permission for the proposed erection of 2 new warehousing storage units and associated car and lorry parking, along with associated ancillary works on lands at Cascum Crescent, the Boulevard, Banbridge. The proposed operator of the units is EOS IT Solutions, which is a family-run global technology and logistics company, providing collaboration and business IT support services to some of the world's largest industry leaders, delivering forward-thinking solutions based on multi-domain architecture. EOS already operates from an existing building on adjacent land. The proposal is in compliance with the current local development plan for the area, the Banbridge Newry and Mourne Area Plan 2015, as it is located on land zoned for economic development within the Satin development limit for Banbridge. The proposal went through a detailed pre-application community consultation exercise to provide interested parties the opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed plans before the submission of a planning application. The subsequent planning application was accompanied by detailed information, assessments and reports to demonstrate compliance with the relevant planning policy tests. We would like to state our full support for the Council's recommendation to approve this planning application, which will bring substantial economic benefits to the area, which represents a total investment of £10 million approximately, and will provide 30 jobs during the construction phase and approximately 20 jobs when operational. That concludes my opening statement, and we are very happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And well within your time there. Members, open to any questions at this point. Anybody has any? Okay, Councillor Savage.
Thanks very much, Chair. Kyle, it's just a question about one of the conditions, condition 11. All HGVs, forklift trucks and other vehicles associated with under servicing development hereby permitted shall be fitted with broadband audible alarms. I'm a bit of a technophobe, but can you tell me what the purpose of these is? Is it to mute the sound of them? Is it a muffler on them, or what the purpose is? I'm just curious and interested as to how they work. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, so from research I would have carried out on that type of system, instead of the normal beeping of a lorry, it would be like a white noise that is emitted. And research would show that that's actually safer for the people on the site, but also then for neighbouring properties or other people. The impact on it actually is a lot less than the beeping. So that would be a betterment than having the beeping system on any of those vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Kyle, for that presentation. No, just following on, maybe on the theme of noise levels. A note in the report that Environmental Health had carried out noise assessments at various times, and it was 40 to 42 from 7 to 11, I think it was, on 50 decibels from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think I'm getting the times right here. No, I'm just wondering, and it states that those levels would indicate that they're pretty low. I'm not one for knowing the decibels here, but maybe we could just maybe seek for clarification the noise level there. And is there a fence, is it an acoustic fence or what is going on there, Kyle? And landscaping as well. Maybe just give me some clarification on those 2 points, and that the noise levels will not be a detriment to the Banbridge House Care Home and other ones around that particular area. Just for some clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, so just in terms of the noise levels then, so the background noise levels were calculated between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to be 50 decibels, and then between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. to be 42 decibels. So the dominant noise source at the moment at that site would be the traffic generated from the A1. So whenever the rating was then applied of what the impact of this development would be on the residential properties, I think the impact was in around the mid sort of 30s on most of the residential receptors. So that's below the background noise level. So from that then, from the British standard, they determined the impact to be low on development, on the residential receptors. As mentioned, then there is an acoustic fence that is proposed. It's not included on the plan, so we have that as a condition where those details would be submitted after, if the application was approved, and then would be brought back to committee if the committee approved the application to agree at those details at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Anderson.
Thanks, Kyle. No, just on the back of that, when the acoustic fence is put in position, will there be levels taken then by the environmental department to see what the actual levels are? I know that maybe the background from the road, we're making assumption here that the less than what the traffic assessment would be. So just from my own information, would there be another test done with that acoustic fence in position, and it's in place before the development begins? Is that right? Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the acoustic fence, it has to be constructed prior to the use commencing on the site. In terms of any levels being taken by the Environmental Health Department after that, there wouldn't. I don't believe it would be the case that they would be taken. But indeed, if there was an issue with noise or a noise complaint at that stage, I'm sure then the Environmental Health Department would investigate that.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Anderson?
Just thanks, Kyle, again. Thanks for that. That's one of the issues they had. Thank you.
Mr. Savage?
Thank you, Chair. I've just two questions, and it's just one for Kyle. I know he maybe highlighted it in the report. Kyle, in terms of the fallback position, from reading the report, I think that the argument you could use is a betterment. And in your opinion, would this be a betterment in terms of the application, in terms of closeness? You did give us an outline in terms of the separation distances. So I'd just be interested in just teasing that out a wee bit more. And also just one for the applicant, Chair. There's 17 conditions been imposed on them, and for very valid reasons. And I just want to ensure that they're content with them. So I suppose there's just two questions, Chair. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I believe that this would be a betterment than the fallback decision. I think in terms of the vehicle movements that are going to be generated from this development, they're going to be significantly lower than if the extant permission was developed out. In addition to the extant permission having buildings within 10 metres of the boundary with the care home and Banview Court, they also had parking areas adjacent to that as well. So there wouldn't just be potentially disturbance from those buildings, but then obviously people coming to and from the building, which would be significantly greater numbers than what are proposed here. If you take, for example, the main car park is to be formalised within this application, and it's the main car park is set back well away in excess from them, albeit there will be some HGV parking closer, but definitely not as close as what's proposed in extant approval.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any other lights on. Oh, sorry. Yep. Martin, just on the conditions, if you want to come in there, you're welcome.
I need to be unmuted, do you? Or can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. No problem.
Yeah. Well, we have Trevor Higgins here, representative of the applicant, and Mr. Higgins is aware of the conditions, and it's my understanding that they're acceptable to Mr. Higgins. So perhaps Mr. Higgins maybe might want to chip in and just confirm that, but that's my understanding.
Yes, Martin, we're happy with the conditions.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, thank you. Any other queries, members? We'll move into the debate phase. You can express your views on it. Okay, Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Kate gives a very comprehensive report, and I'll answer the questions in relation to the noise that Alderman Anderson had asked. And I think, overall, this new scheme, as Kate's pointed out, is a betterment to what could be put there. So, I reminded to approve the application. Just my thoughts, Chair.
Okay, any other views, members? Okay, we'll maybe move Alderman Twyvell, yeah.
Just, Mr. Chairman, happy to concur with the proposal.
Okay, moving to the decision phase. Hope I'm reading the room okay. Alderman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy with the responses and the issues that were raised here. And as has already been said by the Vice Chair, it's a betterment of the fallback position. So I'd be happy to propose we accept the officer's recommendation with the conditions attached. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a proposal from Alderman Anderson. Have we any other proposal or a seconder? Alderman Twyble.
I'm happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, members, I don't see any other lights on or hands up, so I'll take that as proposed then. So thank you very much on Appendix 2. So we'll move now to Appendix 3. And that is LAO 2022-0462. And Liam is going to bring this application to us. So Liam, when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a site for a dwelling garage on a farm at lands adjacent and south of 36 Point Road in Banbridge. The application is before members because we have more than 4 objections from separate postal addresses. As stated, the application site is located in the open countryside, as defined by the Banbridge and Uri Mourne Area Plan. The Plan and Strategy for Rural Northern Ireland and PPS 21 provide the relevant policy context for consideration of this application. Policy CTY1 of PPS 21 identifies a range of types of development which are considered in principle to be acceptable in the countryside. One of these is a dwelling on a farm in accordance with Policy CTY10. Under Policy CTY10, development will be granted for a dwelling house on a farm where 3 criteria are met. The first criteria A, states that the farm business is currently active and has been established for at least 6 years. In this respect, DERA have advised that the farm business has been in existence for 6 years and that the farm business is currently active. So category A has been satisfied. In terms of category B, no dwellings or development opportunities out with settlement limits have been sold off from the farm holding within 10 years of the date of the application. In this respect, officers undertook an assessment of the plan and history of the farm scheme map and have not identified any dwellings or development opportunities sold off. So in that respect, criterion B has been satisfied. In relation to criterion C, officers consider that the dwelling and associated farm buildings situated to the north of 36 Point Road are part of an active and established farm business. This grouping of buildings forms a substantial backdrop to the proposed site, and when viewed in a northern direction from the access laneway, officers are content that the siting of the proposed dwelling can be visually linked to the existing group of farm buildings subject to a siting condition. So therefore, the proposal complies with policy CTY10 and the principle of development is acceptable. In terms of design, integration and layout, you'll note that this is an outline planning application and that officers consider that a dwelling with a ridge height of not greater than 6.5 metres would suitably integrate into this rural landscape, as the mature hedgerow along the site boundaries provide a suitable degree of enclosure. The proposed siting condition for the dwelling is also adjacent to existing agricultural buildings and will provide a backdrop from critical views that are restricted to a short section of the laneway. Officers consider that the proposed siting condition, ridge height restriction, that the site could provide a suitable degree of enclosure for a dwelling when considering the topography of the site and the surrounding lands. So therefore, it's considered the proposed development complies with the SPPS policy CTY10 1314 of PPS 21. In terms of traffic and parking considerations, again, this is an outline application seeking approval in principle only. However, there was an indicative layout provided that indicates a new access onto a private laneway to serve the proposed dwelling. The private laneway then connects onto the Point Road. Policy AMP2 of PPS 3 states that planning permission will only be granted for a development proposal involving direct access or intensification of use of an existing access onto a public road where such an access will not prejudice road safety. In that respect, DFI roads were consulted in relation to the proposal and advised they have no objections. So the officers are therefore satisfied that the development will not prejudice road safety and is fully compliant with AMP2 and AMP7 of PPS 3. In terms of impact on residential amenity, the only residential property in close proximity to the site is number 36 Point Road, which is owned by the applicant. It is considered that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on the amenity of the residential property, considering the separation distance created by the siting condition and the introduction of appropriate landscape and planting scheme. The Environmental Health Department were consulted in relation to an assessment of the residential amenity associated with proposed dwelling being located in close proximity to existing farm buildings. Environmental Health note that the adjacent business is within the control of the applicant and have no objection in principle, subject to suggested informatives. The third-party representations have been considered and set out in the report, and approval is recommended, subject to conditions. I'll just go through the PowerPoint. So this is the location of our site, just between Banbridge and Lawrencetown. Just an aerial view of the proposed site as outlined in red. You can see the access from the Point Road and the farm buildings to the rear. This is just the proposed siting condition. You can see the visual linkage and clustering as proposed. Just a view of the proposed site on access from the existing laneway, so you can see the backdrop of the existing agricultural buildings and dwelling. Again, a view of the existing agricultural buildings. You can see our site just on the left-hand side. That's the view of the existing dwelling. That's just located beside the farm buildings. Essentially, this is the view of the access point. You'll note that it's a very, very long laneway, and our site's actually hidden from public view from the vantage points along the main road. So it's basically over the hill and behind the ridge top there, so you can't actually see the site from the main road. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. A written report has been received from John Collins, which I think is included in our addendums, which has been circulated. And members, I'll take any queries or questions you have on this one to Liam. Okay. I suppose just for the purposes of the meeting, a lot of third-party representations have been made on this one, but I know they're focusing on matters that are ultimately outside of the control of planning, and there's not a lot we can do about those issues. But they have, I suppose, been fully addressed. Was communication sent back to the objectors on those various points that they're made aware of our position in terms of the likes of those civil issues that are beyond the scope of our committee, Liam?
Yes, sir. Essentially, the first, when the application first came into us, the notice wasn't served correctly. The named individual wasn't right, so we went back and we got that served correctly. With the revised address point, there was a sort of a contestation over the address of the named individual who was the landowner. So yeah, that was all tidied up, and there has been various pieces of correspondence between officers and the objectors, and we're now content that we have resolved those.
Fine. Members, any other queries or questions? If not, we'll move into the debate phase. You can give your views on it. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the planners for the presentation there. Again, I've read through this carefully and be inclined to think that approval is the correct decision in this case. Again, this is an outline application so therefore access arrangements will come at a later stage, but I think in terms of a domestic dwelling on a farm site, it's in beside the cluster of the other dwellings there, and there's tucked out away, as Liam said, with regards to the long laneway. So I think the recommendation in this case for approval is the correct one.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery would be in agreement with what you said there. Also, any other points, members, or positions on this one? Okay, I'll move to decision stage, and I'm happy enough to propose this one. I feel as Councillor Avery said planners have certainly given a fair hearing in that regard. Councillor Lavery, your hands up.
Yeah, content to second the recommendation to approve, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other lights on the proposal, members, so we'll accept that one as approved, and we'll move to Appendix 4. Nicola Craney, our Senior Planning Officer, is going to present this report on PowerPoint. So, Nicola, when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for a dwelling on the Craigavon Road. It's been presented to committee because the applicant is related to a planning member of the planning team. Firstly, I have a suggested amendment to condition 5, which I'd just like to outline. And I'd like the condition to read, in accordance with drawing number 02A received on the 6th of September 2022, the existing natural screening of the site to the western, northern and southern boundaries shall be retained at a minimum height of 1.8 metres. During the first available planting season after the occupation of the dwelling, a native species hedgerow and trees shall be planted at the eastern rear boundary and to the rear of the visibility displays, and retained at a minimum height of 1.8 metres unless necessary to prevent danger to the public, in which case a full explanation shall be given to the council in writing within 14 days. All landscaping shall be retained in perpetuity, and the reasons to remain the same. The main principle of development here focuses on CTY 8 for an infill dwelling, and the full consideration is set out in the planning report. The site is considered by officers to be a small gap within a built-up frontage. Number 4, 6 and 8 are the buildings which surround this gap. There's no impact on natural or built heritage. There's no concerns regarding access and parking, and it will not result in a detrimental impact on residential amenity. Officers consider the design and materials are sympathetic to the rural area. There are no third-party representations and there are no objections from any consultees. The recommendation is to approve, and I'll just go through the presentation. Thank you. This is the location of the site, which you can see is just outside the settlement of Armagh. Next slide, please. And you can see a view of the site. You can actually see number 4, 6 and 8 and how this site just fits really in a very similar way to what is already along that road in terms of complying with the requirements for infill policy. Next slide, please. This is a site location plan. Next slide, please. This is a layout plan. This is a full application, so the layout and the elevations and plans were all submitted. Next slide, please. This is the front and rear elevation of the dwelling proposed. Next slide, please. Proposed side elevations. Next slide, please. And this is the floor plan. It's a single story. Next slide, please. This is a garage plan for the site. Next slide, please. So this is the site. You can see the site of number 6. The site does rise from the road. So, and this is just a view up into it from the roadside. Next slide, please. This is the view then from north looking south towards the site. Along that frontage, there's a number of entrances to each of those properties. Next slide, please. This is a slide then from further south, looking north. You can't actually see number 4, it's behind the hedge, but you can see clearly number 6 and number 8 and the gap then. Next slide, please. This is the view of the site then from the Moss Road, which is a road just across from it, just further west. Next slide, please. This is the view then from the roadside. It just shows there's an existing hedgerow along there, and a lot of that hedgerow is being retained as part of this, the details of this application. Next slide, please. That's number 8, Craigavon Road. So you can see the dwellings actually number 4, 6 and 8 are all 1.5 story in format, but this proposal is a single story. Next slide, please. This is number 6, and I think the last one's number 4. Next slide, please. Yep, number 4, Craigavon Road, so you can just see to the properties. Next slide, please. Yes, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola? Okay, no representations on this one, so members, I'm open to any commentary on it. I suppose just in terms of your amendment, Nicola, to the conditions in terms of the hedge height, it does seem, the boundaries do appear, fairly well grown at points on the other, on the neighbouring properties. Well, how do we complement that, or will there be like a double hedge? Because I've seen that at times, and it can get quite hard to manage if we're asking people to plant and maintain hedges at a height that maybe their neighbours aren't that overly happy with. Is there any scope for adjusting that should the need arise when it's actually fully out in bloom at the required height? I see a laurel hedge in one of them as well, and they can grow quite sporadically, and they take a lot of maintenance. But just keen to get your view on that, just in terms of the practicalities of it.
Thank you, Chair. Condition 5 is in regard to the parts of the site which don't have a hedgerow. So really the rear of the site, which is the western boundary, the rear and eastern boundary doesn't have, it's undefined. So it's to put a new hedgerow in along there at around 1.8 meters, so to retain it then at that. And then really just the front of the site, if there's any hedgerow to be removed as part of the visibility displays, just to replace that. The other condition further down is just to retain any existing vegetation. We're not actually asking for planting along those boundaries if there is already existing vegetation along it.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on that. Thank you. Okay, members, any other questions or queries on this one? Not, then we'll move to the decision phase, or the debate phase, and then decision. I'm pretty content with it, members, in terms of what I've heard and seen in the presentation. Alderman Anderson.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thanks to Nicola. This is probably one of the more easier ones for an infill site. We do meet the more difficult ones, and all the points are there that it does meet all the criteria for an infill site along that road. And I'm happy the way it's been presented and the recommendation. So happy enough. Thank you.
Okay. Members, don't see any other lights on, so we'll move into the decision phase, and I'm happy enough to propose that we accept the recommendation. Alderman Anderson.
I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights on or hands up. So thanks, members. That brings us to the end of our planning meeting. So if we could have the live feed stop.